Here we are. Let's go ahead. Hadiya, you are ready to go?
Yes, I am
All
ready to
right.
go.
Well, in a few minutes here, we'll call
Okay.
you upon and bring you
Okay.
in and do the thing. Folks, welcome again. Hi, this is Alex Salas. I'm your president for ATDCFL chapter. We have Rosa Espinal with us. She is helping us out in programs. She's also past president, as you probably know. And we are here in a very special day. We have a great webinar coming up that we're doing right now with Hadiya Nuriddin, and she's going to talk to us about storytelling for learning. Before that, I wanted to remind you that we have the Wild Conference, and feel free, as Rosa is going to be checking on the chat with us, feel free to use the chat and say hi. So we're here on the side. I'll say hello there to everybody. And let's see, panelists and anything. This, say hello again. There we go. We say hi there, and you can see, you may see an icon flashing on your window there. But it's my pleasure to be here with you and share this great webinar. A couple of things in housekeeping to remind you is that we have WILD 2019, which is our annual conference. Our early bird rates end July 1st. Do not miss this opportunity because we got some awesome stuff happening, guys. We have Jordan George doing our keynote, and he does some amazing stuff with very interactive, an interactive facilitation workshop that he does for play at work, so purposeful play. And we have Mara Roldan doing coming actually from DC. She works for Amazon, and if you ever been to any of the big conferences, the ones you got to pay, $1,700 for, she is coming to us. She's always there in those conferences. She's coming to us, and she's helping us out. She is going to do a couple of things. She's going to speak about how to do augmented reality in your training and reinforce your training and performance support with augmented reality. And she's also going to do a workshop on Saturday, the 10th, where she's going to actually show you how to build an interface, kind of like those that are like Alexa or Google Home or things like that, for training purposes. So really a great opportunity to be with someone that's pretty awesome. I myself going to be doing a workshop on Storyline. So if you like doing e-learning design and Storyline development, I'm going to be doing one that is on gamification. And we have 12 concurrent sessions. Early bird rates are available. You just go to, if you're a member already, which you obviously are if you're here, just go directly to our page for registrations, and you see your early bird rates there. They are just for members, because you're already a member. So very good rates there. Take advantage of that. Remember, July 1st, it ends. So that was wild, and that's what's happening August 9th and August 10th. We do have also some cool events coming up, and there's some special news I got to give you. So Linda Lorenzero is going to be with us in the next webinar. She's going to be showing us how to turn e-learning assets into graphic novels. So now that you learned today how to do stories, then you'll be able to turn this stuff in the power that Hadiya is going to give us today, and then turn it into graphic novels, and you'll be all set. You'll be a rock star in your learning and development. So one special news set of special news I wanted to share with you is that, for one, is we are looking for volunteers, people that want to join us on the board. Just go to this page and apply. And, great opportunities are happening. We're having a couple of separate webinars for that. And if you're interested, actually, I wanted to ask you, and please feel free to use the chat to let us know. I know that you have seen the Off the Cuff vlog. If you haven't, go to our YouTube channel or go to this page, and you can find all the episodes that we have. We have one episode with none other than Hadiya Nuriddin, who is here today with us. And so today we're going to learn about the power of storytelling for learning purposes. And there's no better person, as I said on that vlog episode, there's no better person to talk to than Hadiya Nuriddin. She is an ATD facilitator. She's an instructional designer. She is a storyteller. She basically encompasses everything that has to do with L&D and the learning strategy. And obviously, she's been very successful at doing it. As you can tell, she's showing her from hotel room and traveling the world and all that. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you Hadiya Nuriddin.
Thank you so much, Alex, for having me. So now we get to deal with some technology fun.
Yay.
I am going to, okay, I'm going to say yes. And then
I'm going to stop sharing here.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen.
Hey, there's my big head.
Share. And I was going to do my video for just a second. I am in a hotel, so I'm a little concerned about the band.
There she is.
So, hi. If I start doing the robot, if it starts getting choppy, then let me know. Watch out. Let me know, and then I will turn it off, and maybe that will help.
It's a battle.
It's a battle. The technology gods are in charge. Okay, here we go. All right, so hopefully you can see my screen. I can't see the chat from here, which makes me sad. Is there a way to, let me see if I can do this. Small screen. Nope, that's not it. Large screen. No, that's just Alex really big. Let me change that somehow. I think I'll just come out in order to see the chat, because
I can cover the chat for you as well if you need. But I'm pretty sure you want to see the feedback. Okay.
Yeah, I want to see them, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, which will be very soon. But here we go. All right, let's go ahead and get started. As Alex said, my name is Hadiya Nuriddin, and today's session is about storytelling for powerful learning. And I'm excited about this. I actually wrote a book called Story Training and came out in March 2018. And it focuses on storytelling in a learning context. It does focus primarily on facilitation. However, as a facilitator and an e-learning instructional designer, which is primarily what I do, and developer, I use storytelling all the time in a variety of different ways, and a lot of times working with subject matter experts to get stories out of them. I think when I started and I started thinking, oh, I'm going to have them tell me a story about what they do, I was a little naive and thinking they knew exactly what I was talking about when I said stories. So now I use my own sort of the tried and true frameworks to try to extract stories from them to get what I need. But I usually model what I'm looking for by telling a story in the framework I'm looking for, so that they can give me the information exactly how I need it. So I say that to say, storytelling techniques are great for everything we do in learning development, from facilitation to writing scenarios, which I also teach a course called Scenario-Based E-Learning, and also my own scenario course, and do it for a living. So you can use this in a variety of different contexts. So here's me living my best life here. I have the picture up here just in case the camera didn't work. But I am a learning strategist, instructional designer, e-learning developer, speaker, story guide, where I have my own clients who are looking for ways to enhance the stories they tell. I get a lot of clients who are looking to tell stories in interviews. So I'm able to apply some of my techniques to that and help them make sure that they are able to tell the type of story that they want to tell. And as I mentioned, author story training. I've been in learning development for about 20 years or so. I started my career in computer technical support, and realized that people weren't mad enough at me. So I got into training development. So it's been a great transition, especially when it comes to e-learning, because it gives me that foundation of what I need to do. And I was storytelling back then in tech support as well, to try to explain why their Windows 3.1 and Windows 95 wasn't working as they anticipated. Dated myself, of course. All right, so I have a question for you, and I'm gonna come on and see if I can operate the poll right quick, see if you can see it. Can you see the poll? Alex, can you see the poll?
Not yet. You may have
launch
to launch
polling.
It, but I can launch it for you. All right, okay. There we go.
There we go. Okay, good. So this is my question for you. What challenges you most about storytelling? There could be other ones that you can mention as well. But just give me some answers here of what you're thinking about. Some of you are in the chat, so that's good. All right, so finding the stories to tell. That's what I find are big ones there. Telling stories in an entertaining way, incorporating stories into my work. Yeah, I'm not surprised that finding good stories to tell is the winner. It's typically the winner. And there's a couple of reasons why. One is that we always think our stories are boring, our stories aren't interesting. And hopefully, if nothing else you get out of my session today, you will realize that that is not the point. But this is also not just about your stories. Always be thinking that the point of telling your stories is not so you can be this interesting person and people will think you're great. It's for you to bring that out of others who also feel like their stories are not interesting. But when you're trying to write some e-learning and trying to write a scenario, their story is the most interesting thing in the world and you just want them to tell it so that you can write it down. But so many feel like they undermine their stories. They don't feel like it's something that's interesting at all. So what I'm going to share with you today is some ideas around how to get around that. So I'm going to end the poll. And I'm going to share the results right quick so you can see our clear winner is finding good stories to tell. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing and then close and narrate everything I do apparently. All right, so my belief is that the stories that shaped your life led to lessons that shaped your life, and that those lessons are valuable to share with others. Back when I was a facilitator and only talked to the note cards and didn't look at the audience and didn't share, that's a useful story. That transition to becoming the facilitator that I am today, that only sometimes does that, is a powerful lesson for other people to hear. Now, you may think, who cares? Everyone knows that. No, that's not true. That is not true. A lot of people are still trying to make the transitions that you've already made, just like there are people who have made the transitions that you would like to make. It's just finding what those lessons are. And again, just another reminder, of course, that PowerPoint doesn't move when you want it to. That the point of this, of course, is that you are going to share your stories. As I mentioned, my days back in tech support, the only reason I would bring that up is if I was trying to get a story out of a client who also may have had the same story in his past or something like it. Doesn't have to be the exact same story, as we'll talk about. But my goal is to create sort of this safe space and to create this environment so that he can feel comfortable sharing his stories just like I'm sharing mine. So my goal for today and our little time we have together is to provide strategies for selecting and then shaping the stories once you've selected them. And I can't stress enough that one thing that's very, very important is that it's wonderful to have a good, interesting story. But if you haven't meticulously and intentionally shape that story to try and get the outcome that you're looking for, trying to get the impact that you're looking for, then it's just a testimony. It's not a story. And most of all, picking stories that show some sort of change. So we'll talk about that. So this is me at age 4. Now, why I'm showing this picture is because sources close to me tell me that I've been wearing glasses since I was 3 years old. And all of the sessions I've had people raise their hand if they can beat that. One person beat it at 2 years old. But usually 3 years old seems to be rather young. The polling question is up again. Let me go ahead and get that away. But usually that's pretty young to wear glasses. So, you know, even after all of these years, I'm still not completely sold on wearing glasses, but here we are, I'm still wearing them. But I had this idea that when I got older and got put in charge of procurement of my own glasses, that I would only get brown frames. The idea is that the brown frames would just move so effortlessly into my skin and camouflage it that you couldn't even tell I was wearing glasses. In fact, going to show you a picture right quick. God, my resources on my computer are slow here. Let's see here. There we go. Show you this picture. Now you probably can't tell, but I am wearing glasses in this picture. They're right here. Yeah. So clearly I realized that people were on to me, that everyone could tell I was wearing glasses, and wearing brown frames wasn't stopping anything. So after a while I said, you know what, maybe I'll stop the brown frame thing. Maybe I'll get glasses that are a little bit more interesting, a little bit more exciting. But every time I went to the eyeglasses place, it was either brown frames or something like this. Like I didn't see anything in between. Brown frames or glasses with feathers on them. That was it. So it was really frustrating for me because I would always come back home again with these brown framed glasses. So one day, last December, I said, forget it. I put my foot down and said, Hadiya, you're going to go to that eyeglasses place. My favorite eyeglasses place is in the Water Tower in downtown Chicago. I said, you're going to go to this eyeglasses place and you're going to find some nice fancy glasses, and that's the end of it. So I go there very begrudgingly and look for glasses, and I saw some blue frames. And I said, okay, those are fun, I guess. And then, and I'll never forget this, I was looking in the mirror, and over on the side, just out of the left-hand corner of my eye, floating on glass, was this pair of frames that I had never seen before. They were clear frames. I had never in my entire life seen clear frames before. I didn't know they existed. I was shocked. And I thought, how did I get this long without seeing clear frames? That would be the answer, not brown frames. Clear frames would be the answer. So when I left that eyeglasses shop and I looked around, within 10 minutes, I'd seen somebody else with clear frames. I thought, what a coincidence that in Chicago, the only two pair of clear frames would be right here, right in 2 feet of each other. It took about 24 hours to realize that they were always around. Everyone has clear frame glasses. They're extremely popular. Everyone can, even Kim Kardashian has clear frame glasses somewhere in her. All right. Yeah, I knew that those days would come in handy.
Hey.
Okay.
That's actually, that was all, I just want to say that was all built in, guys. You know, it's part of the climax of the story.
I was creating a story for you to go back and say, what the heck was that? All right. All right. So there we go. Okay. So the goal was to tell you about this idea of that there was something that existed all along, these glasses that I hadn't seen before. And I have noticed that when stories stick to you, when you think about them over time, it's probably because you've learned something. And as I started to think about it, I thought, maybe that's the way I see life. I have this way of only seeing what I want to see. So there's only Chicago in my mind, only this haircut, only this style of dress, only this job, you know, only this life. I sort of do that to the exclusion of everything else. So I went to the eyeglass shop a million times, but only saw one type of frame and didn't allow myself to see the other options. So I have a question for you now, if you can remember the rest of the story. The question I have for you, and you can go ahead and answer this in the chat, is how is that story about finding true love? I want you to answer that in the chat. See what you have to say. How is the story about only seeing what you want to see? It's the exclusion of everything else. Why is that about true love, not really glasses? It's been in front of you all the time. Anybody else? What? How is it about love? Just give me one more. Be open to possibilities. You never know. Yeah, you have an idea what the perfect mate looks like, the perfect glasses, if you don't open your eyes and really put yourself in that position. Also tell me, how is this story about a brand new supervisor who has to measure performance for the first time? How is this about a brand new supervisor who has to measure performance for the first time? What can she learn about from this story that has to do with glasses? Yeah, sometimes your metric is off. What you're looking for, the preconceived notions that you're coming in with can color what you're even allowing yourself to see. How else is this about Give me one more. Why is this class's story about measuring performance? Yeah, look around and say how others solved it. Right, right. So the point of this, so why I'm going through this and showing you this, is this idea. Now, some of you may have been blessed and highly favored without ever having to go to the eyeglasses shop and endure the process of looking for glasses, which is always ironic because you can't see what the glasses look like because you wear glasses. You know, I mean, it's crazy. But even though this story is just very simple and very seemingly mundane, I was changed as a result of that. I'm sure I'll learn that lesson 50 more times, but it's one of those experiences where you had to really think. I was one person when I walked into that place, and I was a different person when I left it. So your stories, even though seeming mundane for you, are important because of that crucial point, that lesson that is wrapped around that story. So what is a story? You know, it seems simple. We think we have the answer to this. But at the same time, we've heard stories that go on and on and on. It's amazing that a person could talk so much, but their story actually does nothing, doesn't move in any direction. We call that navel grazing when writers write that type of material. But a story is a set of connected events, each caused or influenced by the one that came before it. So there's that connection between these events. So that those causal relationships among the events add a forward momentum to the story, which is the secret for compelling the listener to hang on. So you've heard stories like this before, where a person starts in one direction, then they start veering off into all these different tangents, and you're lost. You're like, could you get back to the story? It doesn't matter what color dress you were wearing, because you get back to the story itself. So making sure that those relationships between the events are building momentum, that first this happened and then this happened because of what happened before, is what people use to sort of hang on to those stories. But what's most important is those connected events lead to a change. And that's the point of the story. If there's no change, then all you're telling me is a set of events, which is fine. That's great for the barbecue. But when it comes to telling stories to learners to help promote learning, or any kind of way that you're trying to promote the change, whether it's learning or whether it's making the sale, whether it's you getting a testimony, as it were, from a subject matter expert to build into your e-learning. The point was that this story mattered. Something changed, and that is why I'm telling the story. So can you tell a story that's just a list of events? That's fine. But that's not the type of story that we're looking for when we're thinking of trying to influence behavior. Again, whether or not you're a facilitator or you are looking for stories from subject matter experts. So one of the most important things is the way your story is structured and what's included and how are things connected. Many of you have probably heard of the hero's journey before. There's several steps in the hero's journey, so we're not going to go through all of those. We're going to condense them a little bit. I don't know how many of you have heard before, but what I'm going to do instead is ask you a question about a classic tale that most of us have seen already, that is its foundation sort of rests on this idea of transformation, which is what the hero's journey is all about, being transformed from regular person to hero. So in the chat, I want to ask you a question. When you think about the Wizard of Oz, those of you who are familiar with the hero's journey, what is the ordinary world for the hero's journey? See if I can get this chat open here. What would be considered the ordinary world? Kansas, right? Kansas is the ordinary world, life on the farm. And it's interesting just interpreting those different ways, in that, is it a place or is it a mindset? You know, in her case, it was both, right? There was this place, and then it was also just how mundane and boring things were and how upset she was. She had to do all this work. So it was this place, but also this sort of, she didn't appreciate what she had. She didn't appreciate what she was looking for. So that's the ordinary world. So I'm going to ask you just one more of these along the journey. What is the call to adventure? In The Wizard of Oz, what is the call? Okay, one way of looking at, but how did she get to the yellow brick road? It's weather-based. Wearing them flying shoes. The tornado. Thank you, Karen. Yeah. Yes, yes, the tornado, the twister. It's a twister. Yes, that is the call to adventure. There is one more of, one that's sort of interesting in that getting just the tornado and getting to Oz wasn't enough. She still had to cross the threshold to accept this is my new world now, to get to the new world. So she could have had the tornado and just sat on the bricks and was like, I'm not going anywhere until my mama can get me. But instead, she was prompted to accept the call to adventure and cross the threshold and then go forward. And I think that's an important thing because many of us stop at the call to adventure. There is another phrase called refusal of the call of I'm not doing that. I can't accept that as a thing I'm going to do. Instead, we accept it and go ahead and move forward. So a lot of the storytelling strategies you'll see are based on this idea of the hero's journey from that ordinary place in the very beginning of where life is as it is. And it's an important thing to illustrate because we won't know that a change occurred if we don't know what the state is right now. So here's a very, very condensed version of the many, many steps of the hero's journey. And, why do we use the hero's journey? Now, obviously, it is a cliched way to tell stories. You're not going to win Academy Award for Best e-learning if you use, if you stick with just the basics of the hero's journey. But it's a great way to remember as you shape your story and try to make sure that you are illustrating a change in your character. Right? This is if you're just in front of the room and have to come up with a story right now in front of 30 people, or if you're working with a subject matter expert and you're like, tell me a story, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Or if you are in front of your computer and have to write a scenario and you're trying to illustrate how a cashier can go from customer service 0 to customer service hero. Oh, I have to copyright that one. That's a good one. So let's talk about this very sort of simplistic way of doing it. And then at the end of this, I'm going to take you to a resource that says it's about what we call the story spine that was created by someone, or I would say created, but it's another condensed version of the hero's journey. There are several of them out there, but it just makes it easier to remember how to model this transformation. So let's say this is Kira. Hope I remember that name, Kira. Kira is a young professional just starting off her career, and she doesn't take criticism well. In fact, she doesn't take much dissension well. She takes, when someone disagrees with her or gives her feedback she doesn't like, she shuts down, just completely shuts down, and doesn't say anything as a result of that. But let's say one day someone called her on that, someone challenged her on that and said, no, stay here. I want to hear what you have to say about this. So that was the event. That was the trigger. That was the call. That was the thing that changed everything, right? And so now she says what she has to say as a result of this event. And then nothing happens. Nothing bad happens. She isn't fired. She doesn't cry. She doesn't, all the things that she imagined happening, doesn't happen. Right? So she goes, hey, I've learned a lesson. I've learned that I can say what's on my mind and there won't be a problem. But of course, now she's tested. She's tested time and time again. She's always in the situations and she has to choose. Do I say anything or do I not? Do I say anything or do I not? That's the changing part. That's the struggle, the vacillating back and forth between should I speak up or should I stay silent? And then after she does it enough and after she speaks up enough, she gets to the new world. And this new world, Kara says what she has to say with all the confidence in the world. And she can look back when she used to be someone else. So she experienced this change here, which is essential and important to know. Now, sometimes we change, when we tell stories, we focus too much on the ordinary world. We focus too much on the past, how things were. We gloss over the change and the back and forth and the struggle, and we just jump, we just sort of gloss over the new world. Now things are different, so you should just do that. Well, that doesn't give us much insight into what to do. Sometimes we focus too much on the new world and talk about how great we are right now, but don't focus on this part, which was the change, which is the constant back and forth. And this part of the story is where most people are. You have to present the ordinary world, or else people won't see a change when you talk about the new world. But your stories for learning should really focus on these triggers and these decisions that you have to make as you go back and forth, learning and unlearning and challenging and questioning. Those are the types of things that people learn from, right? Because my new world may look different than yours. My ordinary world could look far different from your ordinary world. It is this event and it is the changing part that is important to know. Right? So this is a simplified way to really think about that long journey of the hero's journey. Really is just about transformation. Now, the question is, how do you do that? Well, first of all, look for lessons that we're going to talk about in just a second here, this idea of looking for the lessons. You want to make sure that you know that you find a story that is based on the right lesson. Oftentimes we hear what somebody is telling us and we sort of start digging through our memories to think of, oh, do I have a story just like that? Or do I have a story? Well, that's not the way to do it. Is to try to find out what the lesson is. Because when you think about it, storytelling is about you, because everything that you are talking about is through the filter of your own lenses of your own life. You can't tell an objective story, but it's not for you. Right? So it's not for you to just tell a story about how great you are. You are telling stories in service of someone else. So you have to make sure that the lesson is not just about what you learned, it's about what they need to hear. No one's asking you to be a psychiatrist. We are asking you, though, to ask questions. If someone comes up to you or if you're working with a subject matter expert, I have a chat here. Oh, if you're looking for if you're working with a subject matter expert and they give you a story and they give you some information, don't just launch into your own story. Ask them, how did you feel? How did that make you feel when that happened to you? Because that's the lesson there, not just the events. You don't have to go around matching the events. And then, of course, once you clarify what that lesson is, then you look for the lesson in your own experience. Now, once again, the events don't have to be exactly the same. If it's an issue about technology, I used to work in technology, but I can't tell stories about Windows 95. I can't tell stories about Windows 10. It's not the same. So I need to find places where I learned that same lesson, but the events weren't the same necessarily. They don't have to be, but the lesson is just as valuable. So when you look for the lesson, you sort of ask yourself, when did I learn about this? When did I learn about that? When did I learn it was okay to speak up and nothing bad would happen? Right? When did I learn that? And then that is the story you tell. But first, let's look at this idea a little bit closer of looking for the lesson. So I'm going to do this anyway, even though we don't have much time. So what I'd like you to do is think about a couple of lessons. And on the next slide, I'm going to give you some options of what to pick from. Say, for example, someone came up to you and you clarified the lesson and you found out that this is a lesson about generosity. Like say, for example, and a manager says, I'm very generous with my employees. I don't really track their vacation time. I let them take days off, but then they take, when they say they take my kindness for weakness, and they sort of exploit that and take advantage of that. And I want to be generous, but I don't know if I'm going about it the right way, right? So give you an example here of what mine would look like. Let's say I pick generosity as mine. What is the lesson statement? What have I learned about generosity? Not what I was taught about generosity. What I was taught about generosity is that you should be generous at all times. It will come back to you. This is great and wonderful. And absolutely, that has manifested itself in my life many, many times. However, I have also learned that generosity without intent helps no one. So my story title would be the Tech Support Family Plan. So I helped everyone in my family with their computers in the 2000s. I wasted my time and they still don't know how computers work. So now when they ask me questions about solid state drives, and I'm like, I don't do that anymore. They don't seem to know anything more about how technology or data is stored on a drive, because I sort of took over and I told them everything. So I have learned, and I've learned that lesson many times, of course. This is just one story or one example of beginnings of a story that I could dig up about generosity. Does it have anything to do with being a manager? No, but I may now have been in that situation before. But it's the lesson that I learned that matters. So what I want you to do is just going to take a few minutes to do this. I want you to pick one of these, just one of these, and pretend like someone came up to you and needed you felt a story was warranted about one of these things. And I want you in the chat to just go ahead and write, what is your lesson? What have you learned about one of these things? Just give me one, whether it's power, I don't know if my chat is in the way or not. But whether or not it's power, courage, guilt, fear, control, whatever it is, go ahead and write what your lesson statement would be for that. I gave you mine for generosity. Go ahead and choose one and let me know what your lesson statement would be. Yeah, power corrupts. Power does not mean you are in control. So obviously you would need a story to back that up. Power corrupts. I'd like to hear a story about that. And corruption. What else? What other ones? What have you learned about it? Loyalty can propel you or destroy you. Now you can imagine in a situation where someone comes up and you're in, whether or not you're facilitating a meeting or a session or what have you, and a story is warranted, and it's about loyalty in a framework you have never been in, but you have that lesson. That's what you've learned. So having some sort of story to back up your statement, because there's few things worse than people rattling off truisms, but they don't have the experience to back it up. Give me one thing. What have you learned about vulnerability? Give me one for vulnerability. Be prepared for the consequences. Be prepared for the consequences. That would definitely warrant a backup story. I'd love to hear that. What other ones? Give me one for, it's okay to be vulnerable, but it helps inspire trust sometimes. Yeah. Right. People can see if you are the facilitator being vulnerable, if you are the person interviewing subject matter expert showing your vulnerability, then it helps. It definitely can warrant that. What about, give me guilt. What have you learned about guilt? What would be your lesson? Boy, none of you had to grapple with guilt. You guys are living some good lives there. Verifies the guilt, right? Taking on other people's guilt. How many of us have taken on the guilt of our managers? Yeah, right. Okay, good. Right. So you get the idea. Someone mentioned Brene Brown. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's good. All right. So it's the idea, again, of course, of it's not digging up cliches in your head. It is knowing from your own experience, knowing from your the core of your being, of what you know to be true, and find the story that supports it. Don't just go looking for, excavating your memory for stories, because you may miss the mark. Okay, so it's learn. So look for the lesson. Look for the lesson. All right, and then support the lesson. So that's the final piece here. So clarify the lesson just by asking questions. How did that make you feel? Look for the lesson in your experiences. What do you know is true about this? And then support the lesson with a story. And again, this is true for, once again, whether or not you're a facilitator or you are working with subject matter experts, because many times they'll give us a scenario that is just doesn't go anywhere. Like it's not offering any insight to the learner. It makes perfect sense in their world, but it doesn't show transformation. It's not getting to the point we're looking for. So you want to make sure you get to the feelings part. How would a cashier feel in that situation? How would they feel? Because that's what's going to help you write that compelling story. All right, so let's look at a couple of ideas. So this is from the book Story Training, and I sort of use at the end of each chapter, of the second part. The second part focuses on shaping the stories and finding the stories, and this the third part sort of focuses on delivering the stories. But these are the four components of selecting those stories, and then finding which ones are the best ones for a circumstance. And so it's sort of a checklist. And at the end of each chapter, there's these three questions, and I'll point you to the website where you can find the checklist. I have them all online for you to look at, both for finding the stories and for delivering the stories. So that first one is connect. So you want a story that fosters connection, and I mean that very broadly. It can be connections between the content and real life experiences, building that bridge to make sure it feels like people can feel like they're there. Can help learners link existing content to new one. That's something we try and do a lot. Where are they now? Where do they need to be? And encourages learners to connect their experiences and ultimately see the world from a different point of view. So you want stories that foster connection from all those different angles, from the content all the way to the people in the room, to their experiences, to you. You're always trying to make connections with story. The next one is relevance, how this matters to them. So is the message clear in your story? And does it speak to that universal truth? Like that, those list of lessons that we had that you provided were all focused on that universal truth. That's so important. It's true for people regardless of the contents of the story. And ensure that it clearly communicates why it matters. I have a master's in education and also have a master's in writing. And one thing that they would torture us with in the feedback all the time was, why are you telling me this story? This story, and they didn't want an explanation, because you assigned it. No, the answer is that the story itself has to show its relevance. It has to prove its worth in the context itself, why it matters. And you have a variety of audiences there. So it's not just why it matters to you or why it matters to that one learner, but why does it exist in its own right? The next one, very important, change. Do you have a story that shows change, where you actually show the protagonist, whoever it is, Karen in a scenario, whoever, or you, going from one state of mind to another state of mind? I don't know how many of you are film buffs, but you'll see this all the time, where they'll say that a character has no agency. And this idea of agency is that this character didn't have didn't exercise the power to make the change they needed to make, or it was out of their hands. So it's both showing a change, but also showing that the learner, or whoever this protagonist is, and usually it's sort of a proxy for the learner if it's a scenario, had the power to change and had the tools to change. It wasn't just something happened to them or something didn't happen to them. They were able to make it happen through their own steps. And then finally, entertaining. Entertaining, of course, doesn't just mean funny. It doesn't have to be funny, but it has to be suspenseful. You know, I would say it has to be suspenseful. It could be funny or it could be suspenseful. There's many ways to entertain people. You know, and suspense is all in how you build it. Do you tell the end first and then, you know, let them go from there? Like Alfred Hitchcock wrote, you know, the suspense is not knowing a bomb is there, but knowing the bomb is there and waiting for it to go off. That he gives you that knowledge ahead of time, and that you have to grapple with the fact that you know that's going to happen, but you don't know when. So sometimes starting with the end is a good idea. It creates that suspense of what's going to happen. You know, you've had that before when people say, did I ever tell you when I was lost in the Amazon forest? What? You know, and so you want to hear that story because you know it's getting to that end. Or sometimes you do want to leave the ending for the big reveal, the big surprise at the end, right? So again, these are online, and it has those full statements there that of questions to ask yourself to really determine whether or not it meets these criteria for a story that can influence behavior. Okay. And finally, and I do have a PDF document to share with you that has all this information here as far as these links are concerned. So you'll be able to take a look at that. But one is the story training website, which is for the book. There's some information on there, but in the upper corner, I have this link, learning library, that has a bunch of stuff. One talks about that story spine that is just a little more fleshed out than that the one the structure I showed you with Kira, but it is way more condensed than the hero's journey. And then there's the story spine generator, which is an online tool that I created that will also help you practice that. Some of you are more interested in the science aspects of it, and so I have a page dedicated to the science of storytelling that has lots and lots of data and research and articles, so you can see how story affects the brain. And then, of course, this storytelling checklist. All right, so in summary, the lessons that shaped you are supported by powerful stories. So that goes back to that looking for the lesson and then finding the story that support it. Look for lessons using reflection, which is not something we're taught to do, you know. Someone mentioned Brene Brown and Eckhart Tolle, good books to read about that. Honesty, which is hard to do, hard to be objective, and generosity. Seek only to give, be open. Again, storytelling is about you because it's going to reflect your experience regardless, but it's not for you. It's in service of other people so they can feel comfortable telling their stories. And then make sure you shape your stories. You know, obviously we want to tell stories chronologically. That's the first thing that comes to mind. But if you want to make your stories entertaining, if you want to make sure that you focus on the change, sometimes chronological doesn't work. So using some sort of tool like the dramatic arc, hero's journey, it's all the same. You know, where you were, the challenge you faced, how you changed, and then at the end, go from there. All right. So, sorry about that, guys. I'm so sorry that we weren't able to, we got through it all, but a little faster than I would have liked. But in our few minutes, any questions?
Yes, guys, put your questions in the chat, please. Thank you, Hadiya, for doing this presentation. We got about 4 minutes, guys. Do your questions on the chat if you like. If you want to unmute yourself, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask the question directly. That's also possible.
Is there a way for me to transfer a file so that they can get this? Or
Yeah, we can. We'll definitely work that out.
Okay.
Actually, just hit me. You can hit me in the LinkedIn message as well.
Okay.
Any other questions, folks? Anybody has a question before we go? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question or use the chat. I need some time to process all this. Yeah, I agree. This
You
is
make it seem
amazing.
so
Okay.
easy.
Yes, that
Oh,
it
it
does.
is not.
It does. Awesome.
Does science show that dramatic stories are more effective than comedic stories? Oh boy. I couldn't say that science shows that. I don't think that's the right metric. It's just being honest and being open and being vulnerable, regardless of which direction it comes from. I think that's the one that we really sort of measure on. But comedy versus drama obviously puts people into different mindsets. But the best stories combine them both, I would say. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. It hits the emotions, right? The different emotion parameters we have.
I say, what do you think about people who never read fiction? I am more of a film watcher than a fiction reader. So yeah, I'm not sure, but it's definitely nice to break out of reality every now and then and to see the world in other ways. Yeah. So people say it's a complicated story. Well, it's like good design. If it's complicated, then we need to focus on the message and try to streamline the story in that way rather than look at the story. Like the story should be the output of how you framed that message, and to make it more complicated before it even gets to this, make it less complicated before it even gets to the story. But yeah, that's a hard one. People say, well, DR stories is not as simple as guilt or. And I would say that for the most part, it kind of is. It kind of is. Actually, that's even more giving you more words than you should. Usually it's fear. At the end of the day, it's just fear. It's afraid of gaining, afraid of losing, afraid of moving, afraid of staying still, afraid of it. Fear is what drives a lot of those things. But yeah, you need to find a way to simplify and break down the story before you even get to the story time. So yeah, it takes some time.
Well, folks, this has been a fantastic webinar. I think so. If you already, by your comments, we can tell that it was awesome. I want to thank all of you for showing up here. There was a link that I put in before for a 2-question survey that you can drop. I'm going to drop it here again. Please fill that out so it lets us know what we need to do. Obviously, we did have the technology hiccup. You have to, not much we can do from a hotel room there. All the way in Portland, right, Hadiya?
I'm on my phone. Actually, my Android moves faster than anything. So I'm
there
doing
you
this
go.
from my phone now.
Exactly. So that's awesome. So I really want to thank you, Hadiya, for taking this time. As always, fantastic stuff. And check out the vlogs, guys. And we have the YouTube channel where we have the vlog episode. She touched on some of these points again. And this recording will be available. There's also a PDF she's going to share with us, and we'll share that with you guys as well, okay? So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. This has been a great webinar today, a digital encounter, and we'll see you on the next one.